Today, I want to talk about strength training for Hyrox. Specifically, how much should you be doing? I'm going to let you in on something just to start us off here. The answer is probably less than you're doing right now. So, of course, strength training and strength is important for Hyrox, but is it the most important thing? Generally, no. For most people, aerobic fitness is going to be the most important part of unlocking better performance for Hyrox. And given that most people have limited training, either by recovery capacity or the amount of time that you have available for training, we need to be thinking strategically about where we're dedicating our training time and capacity to, which in many cases might mean that we need to emphasize aerobic training, building our aerobic capacity more than we do building our strength. So I want to give you a couple questions that you can try asking yourself here to assess where you're at and if you need more strength training or more aerobic capacity. So first of all, you think about what your training background is. So if you come from a running background, it is possible that um, you're going to need more strength training, more lifting, versus if you're someone with a lifting background who just hasn't built up that aerobic base over many years, you're absolutely the kind of person who probably needs a lot less strength training and a lot more running and aerobic work. Another question to be asking yourself here is, are you going to be training for open or pro? If you're training for pro, there's just going to be a higher strength demand on your body and ability to move heavier weights in a more efficient manner, and strength training will certainly benefit you in that aspect. And somewhat related to that last point, you can also ask, are you able to move the weights well as it currently stands? If not, then maybe strength training is a concern. But for most people, they've got the ability to move the weights in Hyrox. It's more a matter of, do they have the aerobic capacity to sustain that and to sustain the running in between the weights? The final question here to ask yourself is, how do you rank relative to others in previous Hyrox races that you've done? So you can look at a website like HiResult, and it'll give you a great breakdown of this. So it'll show you where you stand, in your total running time, your total workout time, and it'll also give you a breakdown by each individual run and each station. So what you can be looking at here is, let's say you finish 100th overall, but you finished 50th overall in total station work, and 150th in your running. Well, that's a pretty good sign that you're ahead of almost everyone on your strength station work, but you don't have the aerobic capacity to match the running that others are doing. So if that's the case, you definitely want to be emphasizing the running and the aerobic capacity in your training. If it is the other way around, where you're a much stronger runner compared to most people, but you're struggling on stations, then maybe you do want to put some more time into strength training. But I would also argue that for the vast majority of people competing in Hyrox, they fall into that bucket where, the average Hyroxer is essentially going to be better at the strength, the stations, than the running component. So even if you're, right in the middle in terms of those rankings in HiResult, you probably still want to be emphasizing your training towards building aerobic capacity, and that's how you're going to make the most progress in your Hyrox time. So let's say you've decided now that you are going to start doing more aerobic training and doing a little bit less strength training. There's a lot of different things that we want to be thinking about as we start to adjust our programming to account for this. So number one is that we still want to try and preserve our muscle, our existing muscle, as much as possible. And there is really good data to show that it is a lot easier to maintain muscle than it is to initially build it. So with as few as 5 weekly sets for a given body part, or maybe even less, you can maintain the muscle that you've built for a relatively long period of time. So that's a pretty good minimum that you can sort of work your way down towards that in your strength training. And I also want to add in here that in terms of how exactly we program in this strength training reduction, that is assuming that you're not currently overtraining. We're not trying to, just get rid of strength training. The goal here is that we're trying to reduce strength training and replace it with some more aerobic conditioning. And this should be a gradual process. So you want to be, increasing your running or cross-training cardio or circuit work slowly over time, and then decreasing the amount of lifting you're doing slowly over time. And of course, when it comes to increasing your cardio, we've talked about this many times before of how to go slowly and progress in a systemic way. In terms of decreasing your lifting over time, there's lots of different ways to do this. Number one, you can just reduce the number of sets you're doing per exercise. So maybe you go from 4 sets per exercise down to 3. You can, of course, reduce the number of exercises. If you're doing this, you want to be careful to make sure that you're still training all the body parts that are and muscles that are important. And number 3, you can reduce the number of workouts that you're doing per week. And this might also involve changing your split. So, perhaps going from a body part split to more of a full body or an upper lower split, something like that, where you're able to hit more muscle groups in a single session. But all 3 of these methods that I just mentioned share the same end result, which is over the course of a week, fewer total sets and time training, which is, of course, going to free up time for building your aerobic capacity. And I want you to see this as an opportunity if this is a road that you go down. So, what you can do here is really just push the quality of every single set and make sure that each set is top notch. So, less, leaving reps in reserve and saving yourself for later in the workout. Really right from the start of each strength training workout, you want to be working as hard as you can, pushing relatively close to failure on all your sets to make sure that you're making them count. So I now want to talk about what you can do specifically if you're in the situation where you're just time restricted and not necessarily recovery restricted. So this assumes, of course, that you're recovering well. What you can actually do here is keep your strength training volume the same, but reduce the amount of time that it takes you to execute that volume. So there's a couple of different ways to do this. Number one is it's called antagonistic paired supersets. So you can think of this as taking 2 opposing muscle groups and pairing them together in a superset. So it could be like bench press in a row. You could do a leg extension and a hamstring curl. And you're pairing those together. So you go right from your set of, let's say, leg extensions right into the hamstring curl, and then, probably a short rest in between, and then you're back to leg extension, then hamstring curl, rest, repeat. And you're doing all your sets like that paired together. Allows you to get a lot more work done in a short period of time And it's also great because you're going to be getting some cardio stimulus from it too. Another option here is uh, drop sets or myo reps. So just to explain quickly what those are, drop sets at the end of the set when you can't do any more reps, you put the weight down, uh, drop the weight by, it depends on the exercise really, but maybe 15%-ish is a good starting point. And then you do as many reps as you can with the lower weight. And then you can continue that process, drop again and again. And you get a lot of quality reps at the end of the set where you're really pushing your body hard. Myo reps, somewhat similar idea. The idea here is that you, at the end of the set, once you can't do any more reps, put the weight down. Uh, you rest for a much shorter period than you normally would on most sets, and then you start again, and you're only able to get a few more reps. But the idea is that they're high quality reps where you're pushing yourself, you know, very close to failure. So maybe you have 100 pounds, you get 10 reps, and then you put that down and rest for 10, 15 seconds, and then you do another 2 or 3 reps. And then similar to the drop set, you can repeat it. Maybe you put it down for 15 seconds, you get another 2 reps, something like that. The idea here again is that you're getting a lot of high quality reps close to failure. Finally, one more way that you can uh, you know reduce the time of your workouts while keeping the volume the same is to, when appropriate and safe to do so, reduce the rest time in between sets. Um, so, you probably don't need to be taking a full 2-minute rest on your sets of bicep curls or calf raises. So, you can definitely look to be shortening those down and saving time in those workouts. Finally, I want to leave you with uh, a few additional tips just to help you go forward here. And, first of all, I want to talk about what what happens if you do lose some muscle when you reduce your strength training volume. I think the reality here is that it's not actually that big of a deal. It is much easier to rebuild muscle than it is to initially build it. So if you do find that you're starting to lose muscle and strength, you can maybe go into a short phase where you're shifting some of the emphasis back to your strength training, and you'll be able to rebuild that pretty quickly. Another point here is on cutting weight. So if you are doing some kind of cut, you'll probably want to maintain slightly higher volume than that 5 sets per week per muscle group that I mentioned earlier, um, just because the body tends to go into a bit more of a catabolic state, which puts less priority on maintaining muscle when you're in calorie deficit. And again, somewhat related to this, if you can keep your protein high, that will help put your body in a state where it's easier to maintain muscle. So 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight is generally a pretty good spot to be. That'll certainly benefit you from a muscle preservation standpoint. If you're looking for help with your Hyrox training and finding that right balance of strength training to uh, you know building your aerobic base in your Hyrox programming, you can check out my app, Hybrid Strength Fitness. It'll build a program custom for you to help you find that right balance and guide you to your best Hyrox result yet.